Good afternoon, everyone. It is a few minutes after 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so I am going to get started. I think YouTube Live is a few minutes on lag, but hopefully it will catch up to me. Thank you for joining me today. We are on our third webinar of my Spontaneous Summer series. Today we are talking all about assessment, how to monitor students' learning in hybrid or distance models. And as everything we have been talking about, these are good practices for in-person learning as well. So if you're watching this, you know we're on YouTube Live, and the recording will be right on my YouTube channel once I am finished this afternoon. And all of the resources are on my Facebook page in the Notes tab. As soon as I'm done, I will be going there and posting all of the links to everything referenced today, including a survey for feedback. Please take a few minutes to let me know what you think of these sessions. Give me feedback so I can learn for future webinars and online collaboration events. And all questions will be answered in our Facebook groups. There are two groups, one for the interactive materials, making the actual technology lessons and materials, and one for the discussion on the research, anything that I referenced today or anything on your mind about the concept of using this pandemic time to reimagine and reinvent education in the United States and around the world. Once again, I am Jane Natalie. I have been working in education for the last 10 years. I have found my passion is not only the magic of teaching students, but also coaching adults. And I take great pride out of partnering with teachers who are on this path of forever learning with me, people who are just starting out in this profession, as well as masterful veterans bringing years of experience to the table. And we are all learning. Social media is new for me, and I am finding the joys of connecting with people online now the way I have in my actual school buildings. So please connect with me however you prefer to interact online and keep this conversation going. Like I said, we are in part 3 of the summer series. Next Sunday, same time, I will be doing my final summer event that is planned. We will be talking about being flexible in our learning spaces. We all know that we will have a mix of in-person, hybrid, and distance learning this coming school year. So getting ourselves organized and some tips and tricks to allow us to seamlessly transition between the 3 models will allow us to focus on what matters most, and that's the teaching and learning. So today's goal is to address how can we help students overcome this concept of amplified learning loss while accelerating learning for all of our students. I'm going to be reviewing the types of assessments that are most effective in our classrooms right now, and then reviewing some of the technology, free and easy tools you can use to have ongoing assessment in your classrooms so you can focus on teaching and the students. It's important to make sure that we are on the same page with the language that we're using. Unfinished learning is not a new concept. This happens every time students have not yet mastered a concept or a skill that has been addressed in the regular classroom. Unfinished teaching is a way to flip that idea, to put the responsibility and the ownership on the adults, on the teachers, saying that, yes, we understand and we take on the challenge of filling in some of those gaps of unfinished learning, and we believe that all students can catch up and get ahead. What is new to us in pandemic world is the idea of amplified learning loss. The natural summer learning loss that occurs whenever students are on break from school, plus the unfinished learning and unfinished teaching due to school shutdown and lack of proper distance learning during the spring of 2020. So we are overcoming that twofold as we enter our schools back in the fall, and some of you might already be starting that process. So we're going to approach this from an asset-based approach. I talked about this a little bit last week, and I approach everything to do with education, students and adult learners the same way. You cannot assume that your students don't know, especially just because of shutdown. So we are approaching this by genuinely assessing their current skill level while staying firm to our belief that all students can achieve at grade level expectations or beyond. And some of the questions that we should be asking to help ourselves shape that asset-based approach are: what are the students bringing to the table? What are their already strengths? What can they do? What skills have they mastered already? Right? We're not going to assume that they are starting with a blank slate. And they are also bringing their own experiences, their own funds of knowledge to the table, and we can capitalize on their interests and their passions to further them ahead in our classrooms. When it comes to assessment, we need to prioritize our focus. We are not going to teach or assess every little thing all year long. It will drive us crazy and it's not plausible. We have to remember that the first thing that is important to us are our students, especially in this pandemic world. So we want to spend our first few days, our first few weeks, and all school year long making sure that we are assessing their social emotional well-being first. So what has the pandemic meant for them personally as far as impact, isolation, trauma? What learning environment do they have at home? What access to technology do they have at home? Are they proficient in the technology that you're using? Right? In the spring, we were thrown into distance learning and we did not have the time to set up our classrooms in a hybrid or a virtual model in ways that took into consideration students' needs first. So now we have the opportunity to do that. And then we can focus on our content. What are the most high leverage essential concepts for your grade level and content area? And what is the critical prerequisite skills and knowledge students need to know in order to engage in your grade level work? And that is what you are going to be focusing on when you assess their potential amplified learning loss. And how are we going to do this? There's a ton of types of assessment and data we can look at, from formal to informal. Formal meaning a standardized test that is normally created by an outside company that your school pays for and implements as some sign of screener. That also means our SATs and our state tests. First, informal tests. What can we create as teachers and have flexibility in implementing to get the information that we need about our students? We're also looking at the summative, right? We all know we don't have last year's summative information to go off of. We don't have our spring tests that we normally look at. How did our students grow over the last year? So we need to look at our formative assessments, meaning what are our checks for understanding during the teaching and learning cycle? And these are assessments that can actually inform and impact our teaching right away, like the next day. And then what quantitative and qualitative data do we have? So what grades are we given? Numerical numbers, right and wrong on a quiz is your quantitative data. But we don't want to lose sight of the power of the qualitative data. Teacher observation of how students are doing, looking at them on your Zoom, looking at their work that is coming in every day. Every assignment that a child hands back to you is a piece of assessment in terms of addressing what can they do and what support do they need to move forward. In the spirit of last year, focusing on things within our control, today I'm going to be talking about the informal formative assessment, and I'm going to give you some ideas of how to use some technology to look at qualitative data as well as that quantitative data. I'm going to frame this conversation through the lens, again, that all students deserve to receive grade level instruction. In order to do that, with understanding that there is learning loss and gaps in knowledge, before you address a new unit or a set of lessons or tomorrow's lessons, we're going to look at a quick check for mastery of those prerequisite skills. This does not need to be a long formal process. It is going to be just your judgment. What do kids need to know before we start our next unit? That is going to let you know what review and remediation you need to do for the whole group, as well as what targeted supports you need to provide alongside that grade level instruction for small groups or individual students. And then we start our teaching and learning cycle. Provide that grade level instruction, check for understanding frequently and informally, give students feedback on their work, and allow space for student reflection on their own learning. And that will allow you to adjust your instruction in real time to keep everybody moving forward. Before we get into the technology, I'm going to quickly address a concept that people have been asking about online from the spring to now, is when students are at home, how do we prevent them from cheating on tests? They can literally just Google it. They're at home on a computer or they're at school on a computer. So my advice, my opinion, my approach is if the students can Google the answer, we need to rethink what we are assessing and how we are assessing them. That said, we can explicitly teach about academic honesty. Academic honesty meaning, how is it that I do research online? How do I cite resources without plagiarizing? What is my responsibility as a student, as a learner in my journey of education? And a lot of these things that we are sending home for students to practice and complete at home is going to count on them participating in it. So this is the time more than ever we need to make students the drivers in their own education. These on the screen are just some of the ways that I frame my thinking about organizing units of study and assessment in ways that go beyond a traditional test, that can lend themselves very nicely to the constrictions and the opportunities of online and hybrid learning. So like we've been focusing on all summer, we're looking at free tools, things that are already familiar to us or easily learned, and things that are very close to our learning management system. We don't want a ton of other tools to learn, for us to learn, for the students to learn, and then that just separates out all of our information. So the things that I'm suggesting and showing you today keep all of our teaching learning kind of close to us so that we can focus on the actual lesson planning, not on the technology learning. I'm going to be going over everything listed on the screen right now, but this is a warning. These are just going to be overviews. I've done my best to give you the basics, but any questions, anything that I missed, anything you want clarification on to see again, to go in more depth, please join me right back in our Facebook group. You can go to Jane Natalie Coaching and click on the groups tabs. And if you haven't already, click one or both of the groups, join them, and continue the conversation there. Google Forms. Google Forms are wonderful. They can self-correct quizzes as long as you use multiple choice. You can make them adaptive based on right or wrong answers. You can use them for your quick checks before a lesson. You can use them as your check for understanding after a lesson. The great thing about Google Forms is everything that goes into one when students respond to your questions are automatically collected in a Google Sheet spreadsheet where you can easily find trends in your data and identify which students need more support and which students are good to move on. I will say, make sure you're using Google Forms when they're appropriate. Some people get Google Form crazy. If you are just asking one question, then you might want to use a question assignment type in your learning management system. I know there's one in Google Classroom. And if you are asking students to complete a lot of writing, paragraphs, more than a couple of words, then you want to look at another tool so that you're not overwhelmed with the amount of writing to read on the back end of the Google form. I'm going to walk you through how to make one. So inside your Google Drive, and I always suggest find your organization strategy, keep all your materials organized, do not just let them pile up in one big list in your Google Drive, create a folder system. We can talk about that next week. You are going to click the new button, and I point this out because you probably will have to click the more selection to get to the Google Forms and then create a new Google form. This is what your blank form will look like. You are going to title the form in both places. There are form options up in the top right corner that we're going to go over in a second. I'm going to click that plus sign to add a new question and insert other items of your choice. And then there are a ton of different question types that we're going to review. What is the best question type for the kind of information you are looking for from your students? And then on the bottom left, bottom right of every question, there are more options. Always look, especially if you're using Google products, always look in those three little dots. That normally means more options. So on the left-hand side are those question insert options that I told you about. The plus sign is create a new question. That's the basic one. But you also have some options to make your form more friendly, specifically inserting a picture or a video that can be your introduction to the form. You can give some directions. You can upload a YouTube video. So you can, it doesn't have to just be a static, word-based page. And then the insert section, if you are interested in making an adaptive form, then you are going to use that sections feature, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. But that is where that is located. That's very important. And then at the top right, those are all your options for your actual form. I just listed a couple things to look out for. Collecting email addresses. In the springtime, we forgot to turn on collect email addresses, and we forgot to ask kids their names on the first quiz we sent out, and then we got a whole lot of responses back, and we had no idea whose was who. So don't make that mistake. Either turn on collect email addresses if you are using students within your domain and they can log into like their Google accounts, or your first question on your form should be, what is your name? And I'll show you that in a minute. You can also limit to one response so that students don't resubmit the assignment over and over. You can also leave that off if you want them to be able to resubmit, check their work and resubmit a quiz multiple times. So that's up to you. These options are based on what functionality you need from the form itself. And then the best part, and these options have been being expanded from Google throughout this entire experience, is making the forms a quiz. So they can grade themselves, they can give students feedback, all on their own. When you make a form a quiz, you get a new set of options when you actually turn the question into a quiz question. So you see that you have this answer key option here now. Let me turn on my pointer. The answer key option now. When you click on that, a box will pop up and you will be able to enter feedback and assign points. One of the options when you turn it into the quiz is whether or not you want this to be a point-driven quiz or not. That you can turn that on and off, but you can assign points here. And then when you click on add feedback, you can write feedback in for the incorrect and the correct answers, and you can insert a link to a website, to another document, or a video. So if you want to give them some feedback on why their answer was incorrect, you can insert it right into the quiz itself. Now, this seems complicated and it can get tedious. So we're not picturing, 100 question midterms on Google Forms. We are picturing quick checks for understanding, a couple of questions to make sure they're with us, and then we're able to provide the proper feedback. So the question types. As always, we are deciding what we want to do as teachers, and then we are figuring out how to make the technology work for us. We are not playing around with the technology and then figuring out how to fit it into our classrooms. So these are all the question types, and then I'm going to show you them live in an example. So we first have our short answer. Again, this is a great option to collect their names. You can put a first name, last name. I recommend that, so then you can sort later by alphabetical order, or just first name. Obviously this will depend on the students' ages as well. The paragraph option, if you are going to have them typing in more than just a couple of words. This is fine if you have, one open-ended at the end of your quiz. But if you have too many long answer questions, then you're going to want to consider a different tool, and we're going to go over that next. Then you have multiple choice and drop down. These allow the students to select one answer, and these are what you're going to use to make those adapted forms. And when you are in those question options, you're going to click on those three dots, and this is going to pop up, and you're going to select go to section based on answer, and then you're going to be able to send students who answer A to one place and students who answer B to the other place. Checkboxes allow for more than one answer, which is great for, select all that apply, which is fine. If you are trying to collect and organize the information later, the data collection in the spreadsheet of the checkbox options gets a little messy, so just be warned of that. I'll show you what I mean in a second. And then the scales and grids are great for surveys, interest inventories, student reflections, etc. And the same rules apply for the multiple choice in the checkbox. Multiple choice, and you can see their little circles instead of squares. Multiple choice, they can pick one per row. Checkbox grid, they can pick as many that applies to them. And then I also want to point out the file upload. So they can attach a picture right to the Google form itself. So if you're doing a math problem and you give them a problem and pick your answer, then you can ask them to take a picture of their work on the paper and upload it right to the form. Might be a good option. And then let's take a look at these sample items in practice. So this is just a form I made with a sample question of each question type so you can see it. So the short answer you would see, you can type right in there. Oh, I put validate. Well, I'll show you that in a second. I put some validation on there, so that didn't work. Sample paragraph, you can type in there. And then multiple choice, you see their circles versus the checkboxes are squares. And so you select one, but these will allow me to select more than one. Drop down box, select one. And then there's that upload file. You click that, you attach it just like you would an email. A simple scale, it'll give you a range. You can pick 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you want. And you write in what you want the descriptors to be. And it allows you to pick just one. Multiple choice grid, you can pick one per row. Maybe I don't like math, really like writing. And then the check boxes, like I said, you can check all of them. You can check one of them, as many as apply to you. There's also the date and time. You can pick a date, and then you can pick a time that works for you. However, that might be useful if you find it. And then they're going to click submit. Before I click submit and show you the other end, if you are the owner of the form and you come across this page, there will be this little pencil in the corner. Okay, a question I get all the time is, once I send out my form, how do I see the results? It is going to be in the corner right here. So I'm going to click that so that it opens. Oh, no, I need to submit my form first. Your response has been recorded. That's where you can edit the message. So you can say, thank you so much, go back to Google Classroom and go to the next assignment, or whatever you want to say to them there. And then I do have the option to submit another response. So it goes back to the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and click edit that form. And now I am in the owner view of it where I can edit. So I'm going to take a look at what happened to this question here. So sample, short answer, and then on these 3 dots, you have the choice for this response validation. This means you're going to say, give constrictions to what can be put in the box or not. So I turned that off, and now that won't give me a warning message, but you can also make the questions required so that they can't skip them before submitting them. And you can also add more information by adding a description. So I can say first and last name if I want to. Once students start filling out the form, you are going to notice this responses column next to the questions, and you see how many people have responded to your survey. So I've done my practice survey 3 times now. So there are 3 responses, and I'm going to click on that. And there are a ton of options here for me to look at the data, and Google Forms keeps getting better and making it easier for teachers to analyze and make decisions based on this data. So first, there's a summary. So it'll show you all the sample, all of the responses, and then it will organize your responses that are not text into some kind of graph. So it's important to know how each style question reports out on the back end so that you can actually make quick use of your data without having to spend time organizing it yourself. So right here, sample multiple choice, you see, I can see, 2 people yes, 1 person no, and I'll be able to, I'll show you in a second how to find out who said what. That checkbox is going to give me a bar graph like this so I can see who responded to what. Drop down another pie chart. The upload a file will create a folder right where you created your form to keep all of the files that are uploaded organized right there for you. So that's a great feature. And then the scale, you can see how many people answered each option on the scale. With the multiple choice grid, it gets more complicated, right? Because they were able to pick more than one. But you see how many people, so nobody likes math in my class. And then same thing with the check boxes with the times they're available. So you can see trends of, what kids like, what kids don't like, right by just looking at the summary view and then the dates. Back up at the top, You can analyze per question. We're not going to do that right now because I don't have real questions to look at. But then you can also look at the individual responses. So if you wanted to scan through individual student responses, then you could find a specific person's and see what they chose for each question. But by the time you get to that, you can also turn off accepting responses. So right here, when you don't want students to answer the quiz anymore or the form, if it's a survey, then you can turn that off, and then the link that you sent out won't work anymore. That's important to know. This is the link to go to all of the responses in a Google Sheet. So when you click on that, a new tab pops up and Google Sheets open. I want to show you a couple of tricks of using Google Sheets to organize your information. The first one I use all the time. I already did it on the sheet, so it looks like this, but typically when you get the sheet, it looks like this, where the words are longer than the boxes, so you can't read all of the questions. So what you want to do is select the row or column that this applies to. And if you want to do the whole sheet, this top white box here, that gives the whole sheet. So I'm going to select this top row, and I'm going to go over here to this little picture with the arrow, and it's called text wrapping. And I'm going to choose this wrap around option. And that means that the text is going to expand the box to fit all of the text. And that allows me to see the questions that correspond with all of these answers. Okay. The next thing you want to know how to do is sort. So say I want to sort based on the answers to this survey. So I want all of the 1s, 2s, 3s put together. I am going to just select anywhere in that column is the easiest way to do it. And then you go to data and then sort the column, sort the sheet by column that you've just selected, A to Z or Z to A. So if I want all the 1s at the top, I can do that. If I want all the 4s at the top, I can do that. So that's sort. That's a simple sort. If you want more complicated sorts, that's a different session, and you can let me know if you want more information about how to use Google Sheets as a data collection tool, and we can get into the nerdy details on functions and sorting and all that kind of data. Just let me know in the survey after this webinar. But a couple of things I want to show you in this data. The difference between the multiple choice and the checkbox here. See, the multiple choice, you only could pick one, so there's one answer per column. In the checkbox, everything I selected shows up here, which is fine depending on what you want to do with it. But if you're trying to sort how many people picked B, it's not going to show up by itself in a column for the checkboxes. So that's just what I mean is get used to the information on the other end of the form. And again, we can do a more in-depth session on this if you are interested. Let me know. But just if you want to have the quick and easy sorting capability of what I just showed you, the multiple choice is the way to go. And there's nothing wrong with, instead of asking, reading, math, and writing in one question because it looks cool, you can certainly just ask 3 multiple choice questions in a row, and then reading, math, and writing would show up in separate columns. So that is important for me because we want to spend the least amount of time being frustrated by the information that we have and spend the most time making sense of it and moving on to adjusting our instruction. So that's why I just am harping on that a little bit, is to get to know the question types. Okay. Google Docs. I'm gonna take some water. So like I said before, don't go Google form crazy. If You are asking the kids to write answers out in complete sentences, anything more than a couple of words, and you're not using that self-correcting or the feedback features, all of that. Google Docs or Microsoft Word might be your answer. And this is where that qualitative data comes in, using the students' work as the assessment piece yourself, so that you can drive your instruction based on their performance yesterday. So I'm going to show you how to turn just a regular blank piece of text right in the classroom. We're used to putting lines in for the kids to write in, or leaving room in the margin, or putting questions on just a separate piece of paper. But when you're in Google world, on the virtual world, it's hard to navigate between two places, two tabs while you're reading. So something that I really like to do, and this isn't just for assessment, this is just for any, reading comprehension type activity that you want to do, anything with a text. You can insert a table into your Google Doc so that the students have a place to type, and it is more obvious where the questions are on the document itself. So you're going to do that by going to Insert, Table, and then this little box comes up and you pick how many boxes you want, and I'm going to show you that right now. So this is just a text I pulled off of Newsy LA. If your district pays for it, that's great. If not, any text will do. And I'm going to show you how to put in a text box. So I'm going to just give myself a little bit of space there. I'm going to insert a table. I'm going to pick two columns, and then it's equal to start with. So I'm going to drag the column over to create a margin for myself. Doesn't have to be big. And then I'm just going to highlight this first chunk of text, use Control X, and insert it into the first row. And so now I have my text and I have my space. And so I can put my question here, and then the students can type their answers. Now, my tip to you is every time you write a new question, insert a new row, because say you wanted a question here, and then you wanted a second question down here. If you use what I just did, you just enter all those spaces as the kid types their answer. And if their answer is longer than one line, it's going to push your question down, and it's no longer going to line up where you wanted it in the text. So if you want two questions, wherever you want your second question to start, just highlight that text, cut that out again, and put it in the second row. And then you can type your question two in, and that keeps it nice and organized. And then if the student fills this box, the whole text will shift down instead of misaligning your questions. So that's a tip I showed teachers all spring. And then when you're ready for your next question, when you are in the last box of your bottom row, you can just hit the Tab button on your keyboard, and that will insert a new row into your table. You can also right-click and insert a row above and below. Above is useful if you decide later to put in an extra question and you need to insert a question above the section you're working on. You can insert a row below. And then you would just keep copying and pasting with your questions in the margin for some guided reading. This will help you, can the students identify the claim? Can the students identify evidence? Whatever your questions are. The other option that we used a lot, and this is great for students who get overwhelmed with lengthy text and need it chunked for them, we would insert just a one box table. So back to Insert, Table, and just pick one by one. and we would insert the question here. Insert your question. And you don't need to press enter that many times because as the students type, the box will expand, but it's good to give them a little space. And then a trick we used in the spring as well was we highlighted whatever box they needed to type in by going over here to the 3 dots. Remember, 3 dots mean more. And then we filled the question boxes with a nice bright color so that it drew the students' attention to where they actually had to complete some work. And so these 2 ways helped me make text interactive online, and it also gave me targeted ways to address what did they do yesterday? Did everybody miss question 3? What don't they understand? And then I can use this qualitative data to make decisions for my instruction tomorrow. Back to my presentation. So Google Slides or PowerPoint is another way. We've been focusing on that with the Bitmoji classrooms and the interactive learning materials. And so all of the techniques and tech tips you've already learned in order to build your Bitmoji classroom are the same skills you need to make quick formative assessments using Google Slides, as well as these being great options for kids to make culmination of independent research projects, a way to organize information for an inquiry-based project like we talked about. But I'm going to show you a couple of ways that they can show their understanding of a concept visually, as well as use it as that pre-assessment to find out what students know and don't know. So this is let me get out of present mode. So this is a worksheet that we have been using for years on how to help us understand and help students self-reflect on what vocab words do they know or don't know. And that is, we would cut up a little piece of paper to make little card manipulatives, and they would sort the words onto a piece of paper. So I just recreated that onto a Google slide. And I did that by inserting a table onto a Google slide, just like we just did in a Word doc, 4 boxes, and then you can resize them there. And then remember, if students are using this in edit mode, that you can put directions on this dead space in the corner. And so they are just going to drag each word to the box that makes sense for them. So maybe they know a claim, but they haven't learned counterclaim. Or maybe they know claim and counterclaim, but they don't know what a rebuttal is. They learned what cite is, but they don't know the word refute. Maybe they can't explain the word cite, but they know what it is, but they definitely know evidence. They definitely know claim. So this just lets them sort the words, and then you can at a glance what kids have no idea what you're talking about tomorrow, and you need to back it up and go back to basics. Or does everybody say they know these concepts already, and so you can do a little check to make sure that they truly do, but at least it gives you a baseline for their conceptual understanding. And this is great for content areas like science and social studies, where it's content heavy, vocab heavy, and you can give this same slide back to them throughout your unit and have them sort and show themselves what words they can move from the I don't know what this is to now I can explain this to others. So this is a great interactive way to help students track their learning in terms of their conceptual knowledge and their vocab. And this is great for math too. Can a student explain to you what the distributive property is conceptually at the same time following the steps on a video? So I really like this one, and I'm giving you a link to this in my resources. Again, on the notes page on Jane Natalie Coaches, you will have a forced copy version of this quick previewing vocab slides, as well as this next one, which is same words. Say we're a week or two into practicing our argument writing, and I want to assess what they know about these concepts, how they're related. So I encourage you, just like I'm about to show you how to use the tools to do this, make a screencast of yourself doing the exercise or an example of the exercise if you don't want to give away the answers, so that they can get the tech help and you're not spending your time answering questions about, how do I make a box, instead of talking about the learning. They would just drag the box onto the slide however made sense to them, and they're mapping their understanding. So they're going to draw lines to connect, and then they can add more text boxes to explain the relationship between the two words. So maybe reasons are going to go over there. They can use the arrows to be more specific, and the reasons support the claim, whatever they want. So this is, again, something that we do in class with little squares on the desk, and they sort the words, and you can use a slide to do the same thing. In synchronous learning, you can use like a Google Jamboard, and they can all have their own slide, or they can work with partners. This is a great way to put kids together and talk about their conceptual understanding and decide together how to move the words around on the page. And then they can present how did they organize and why, and talk through it. So this is a good conceptual check understanding. Again, that qualitative data, using the actual work and activities to reinforce concepts, as well as give you information about where your students are and where they need to go next. A couple other tools that I'm not going to show you how to do, but I'm linking how-to videos and documents in the resources in the notes section, is Flipgrid. A lot of people are talking about Flipgrid. I have a great video and a YouTube channel for you to look at there to get a good introduction to Flipgrid. This is a great way to let kids look at each other, especially if you're not doing synchronous learning online, post videos, talk to each other. And again, going back to the how do we stop them from cheating concept, which is a real one. When I gave students presentations to do, culminating from their research, one thing I would tell them was, you need to be able to define and pronounce all of the words on your slide. Otherwise, you probably just copied and pasted it. So after teaching them how to copy and paste a paragraph from the internet, and then paraphrase it into their own words, and then look up any words they don't know so that they truly understand the material, which is an academically honest way of creating a slide, they would practice reading it out loud. So Flipgrid is a way for them to present short snippets of their understanding if they make a slide just like this. And then you definitely know right away if they really know what they're talking about, or if they're stumbling over all the words on the slide. Maybe they did not put that academically honest effort into it. And then you don't forget, especially for our youngest kids, just uploading and emailing a photo. So I showed you how you can do that right in a Google form. You can also just have students or parents email you a photo, put a photo in a shared folder, demonstrate the work that they're doing, especially if you're assigning non-screen activities, which we really need to think about how to incorporate practice and activities that are not just staring at the computer. They can show you a photo of what they've done. And I made just a quick screenshot of how to do that with your iPhone, how to use the scanner. And this is in the resources as well. And you can share this with parents. You can use it to make your own, make a copy of it if you want, of how to use your iPhone notes as a scanner of documents. You can also just take a picture with your iPhone and upload it. So though I think that was a little bit of a whirlwind of tech tips. Let me catch my breath. Again, I want you to go to the Facebook page. The resources are going to be in the notes section as soon as I'm done streaming, including copies of the slides I've referenced and all of the research that I learned from in order to do this presentation today. And I want to go back again just to remind you that we are framing our relationship with our online classrooms through the lens of teaching and learning cycles. Good teaching is good teaching. We want to figure out exactly what kids need and how to get them to that grade level instruction. I made this graphic, but I don't own the research that created it. I definitely have done a lot of reading myself. Again, through the Achievement Network, I have links to the articles that I read on Achievement Network. Edutopia had a great few articles on formative and summative assessments. And there's a great white paper for you to download, 3 principles for assessment during instructional recovery and beyond. So I definitely suggest looking at that and using that as a text in your own PLCs in your schools. And if you have any desire to have that conversation online, I can do that. I have all of the interest and just looking to collaborate and support teachers the best I can. And that brings me to, we cannot believe it is August, and I have one more session next week on Sunday that we're going to talk about how do we even start to organize our brains around planning for 3 different models of instruction at the same time, and how can we do that successfully. But I want to start thinking about what support do you need and want through the school year. I know a lot of you have reached out to me and said, I'm busy getting ready for my school, but I'm still interested and I want to learn and I want to talk about this. So what can we do to keep this conversation going? One way is to be sure to be on my email list. I am going to be sending out periodic updates with what I'm learning, the research I'm reading, the technology I am discovering. So you can, again, sign up for email if you have not already. If you got an email reminder about this webinar, you do not need to send me your email again, or you can email me directly at Jane Natalie Coaching. Let me go back into present mode for a second. I want to tell you a quick story and explain why I have an American flag on my slide here. So in my free time, when I'm not doing technology and teaching, I am the secretary of the board of directors for my condo association. So if you live on the East Coast or in Puerto Rico, like I do, I'm in New England, the United States. We had a huge storm this past week. There are still people near me who don't have power. It's really devastating damage in Connecticut. I luckily have power and was able to continue to prepare for this webinar. But after the wind settled down, I got an email from one of our condo owners letting me know that she had collected a few of our small decorative flags that were in the mulch, as you see here. And she was upset because the flag was draping on the ground, and that's not a respectful way to display our country's flag. So I quickly assured her that no disrespect was intended, and that a board member would be by to collect the flags and restore them to be properly displayed. And before we had a chance to do that, she emailed me back again the next day and said, her email read, "It has occurred to me that I can be part of the solution. I will go get dowels to use to extend the sticks." And she did. And so you can see, let me get my pointer here. You can see, oops, that there are dowels, and there's an extra piece of wood here holding the flag up higher on the ground. And she went ahead and did that, and she contributed to the solution after she had presented the problem. And that is one of the norms in our PLC meetings, that when you come across an issue, you have a problem, also present solutions. And that's what I've been trying to do this summer, as I see questions and concerns online, is here are some solutions. I hope that these webinars have been a bit of a solution for you, and I would invite you to share with me some of the solutions that your schools and districts are finding, as literally the entire world is trying to manage this complete shift in teaching as we all cope with the pandemic that is not over yet. So I just wanted to share that story. And stay connected. So I'm going to log off now. It is 3 o'clock. We are on time this week. I cannot wait to see your questions in the Facebook group. Again, you can search Jane Natalie Coaching through Facebook, and then there are tabs for the notes for all of the resources, and then the groups for all of your questions. Subscribe to me on YouTube if you have not already. I am going to be continuing to post how-to videos, going more in depth on the topics you saw as an overview today. And feel free, right in our group on the survey, in the link, it should be in the description of the video right now, a survey for feedback, or you can email me directly. What do you want more of? What technology tips were helpful and you want to learn more in depth? Or what other topics are you grappling with as you get ready for your classrooms? And how do you want to continue collaborating as we all go back to work? Some of you already back in classrooms or teaching from home, and some of us preparing in the next few weeks. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to collaborating with you again soon.